Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first workshop. We'll hold for a few more seconds to wait for people to check in. Good morning, everyone. We'll start shortly to wait for a few more people to check in. Thanks. All right. Well, should I start? All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome for the first workshop for track 3 of the California Adaptation Forum. I'm Ignacio Dairit with the Center for Creative Land Recycling, and my co-facilitators are Melody Grubbs at the University of Southern California Sea Grant Program and Ben Gettelman with Kearns and West. We are wonderfully backed by Julia and the rest of the LGC team. They are a driving force in all this, and we thank them. And feel free to please introduce yourselves on the chat with, okay. Feel free to introduce yourself with the chat. Rename yourself on the chat with your full name, please. And yeah, we'll dive in now. Rename your Zoom name with your full name. Now, for our workshop objectives today, we are here to get a better understanding of the specific challenges and barriers to implementing adaptation solutions. We're here to identify case studies, promising practices, and other ideas to overcome these challenges. Now, before we continue further, we have some a code of conduct and some norms we'd like to go through, and Julia will share her screen. So like any meeting, we'd like to be cognizant of our participants and get most out of everyone and to ensure a smooth flow. So we ask that everyone be courteous and you know, uh, with everyone. And our key rules are to stay engaged, practice compassionate listening, take space and make space, be courteous, and expect and accept a lack of closure. So we're not going to solve everything today. We are here to give out our ideas. And I'll just give you a couple of like a minute or so to just go through these so that, and we will remind you if as we are in the heat of our workshop, to please
This is
share with others.
Catalyzing Meaningful Adaptation.
Yes, you're in the right workshop. Yes. So with that, I'm going to hand it off now to Melody.
And I'll actually flag a couple things. I'm sharing the group norms document over chat so folks can see that. It's added to the track shared Google folder. We will share this as part of follow-up as well and encourage folks to provide suggestions for improvement. But for this workshop, we do have a large group with us. So we do ask folks to take a look at these group norms and do your best to abide by these, especially when we move into breakout rooms. There are also a set of Zoom participation standards that we're asking folks to follow, just using the hand raising feature to be unmuted, using the chat function to voice agreement, again, just recognizing that we're we have a lot of people here with us, and keeping yourself muted, of course, to limit any background noise. We encourage folks to turn your video camera on if you have that enabled, especially for the breakout discussions, but feel free to keep it on for the full duration of the workshop. And as always, being mindful to take care of yourself throughout this workshop. You'll also see me send the exact same message out in the chat over and over again. This is for the workshop survey, where we will be launching into breakout discussions later in this workshop, and we're trying our best to assign folks to the implementation pathway that you're most interested in, but also trying to balance out the number of participants in each of those groups. So again, if you haven't taken that pre-survey, we kindly ask you to do so. And as Ignacio noted, if you can change your Zoom name to your full name, so we recognize who you are based on your survey response, that would be great. And with that, I can pass it over to Melody.
Thank you, Ignacio and Julia, for that introduction. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us on this lovely Monday morning. I hope we have some really good discussion today. And so just to share again some of the intent, our groundwork together as a track is to help establish a common vision for what we're hoping to accomplish, identifying challenges to different types of adaptation, learning from each one of you in terms of what's working on the ground and what challenges are happening, what case studies there are. And we'll talk a bit about that in the breakout session and kind of where that leads off to in the next workshops. And so I'm going to share my screen really quick. Find the right one. Okay, so I just wanted to go over the architect vision. So all Californians thrive in the face of changing climate. Leading with innovation, California meets the challenge of climate change by taking bold actions to protect our economy, our quality of life, and all people. The state's most vulnerable communities are prioritized in these actions. Working across all levels of government, the state is prepared for both gradual changes and extreme events. Climate change adaptation and mitigation is standard practice in government and business throughout the state, and California meets these goals with urgency while achieving the following long-term outcomes. 1, all people and communities respond to changing average conditions, shocks, and stresses in a manner that minimizes risk to public health, safety, and economic disruption, and maximizes equity and protection of the most vulnerable. 2, natural systems adjust and maintain functioning ecosystems in the face of change, and infrastructure and built systems withstand changing conditions and shocks, including changes in climate, while continuing to provide essential services. And so we wanted to give you all a moment to reflect on this vision. And we wanted to ask, what stands out to you in the ICART vision? Is there anything missing? A lot of this is a vision of everything we're going to discuss and talk about today in the workshops and breakout rooms. And so if you could go to menti.com, it's menti.com. You can do this on a mobile device as well, and enter the code 92721080. I wanted to leave this vision up for a few moments so you can reflect on it. And we'd like you to just type in something that stands out to you in the vision, or if you think that there's anything missing. So for those who just joined, we're going over the iCarp Tech Vision. I have it here up in the screen. I'll just take about maybe one more minute to go to menti.com, entering this code and typing out what stands out to you in the iCarp Vision, or if there's anything missing. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and turn back to the Menti results so we can take a look at them. All right, so here are some words that have come out of the Mentimeter when thinking about the iCarp Tech Vision. Is there anything missing? We have things like thrive is coming to the top, community-led initiatives, establishing structure, natural systems, resilient, getting there, international action, emphasizing equity, urgency. And so these are all great thoughts moving forward into the workshop. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I am. So, the next step based on these results in today's discussion, I will share a brief vision statement of the list of key considerations as part of follow-up to ground the future work of this track. And so thank you for contributing your thoughts to that. At this time, I'm going to pass it along to Ben to talk about the implementation challenges and what we hope to focus on today.
Thanks, Melody. I think Julia's going to pull up a slide here that I'll walk through.
One second. I think Kelsey's going to pull that up while I get the breakout rooms ready.
Okay, thanks. So thank you all for sharing your input on the vision and sort of where we want to get to in terms of meaningful adaptation. There are lots of different ways to kind of organize this meaningful adaptation space into manageable bins. What we wanted to try to do is set up a manageable number of kind of buckets, and then really have the opportunity today for some brainstorming, some creative thinking. And I think all of that content's really going to inform where we go from here as a group for the next couple of workshops. But just I'm going to walk through these what we're calling pathways. These are kind of containers where we can talk about both what are the challenges that we're facing in terms of getting to meaningful adaptation, sort of getting to this vision, and then what's out there that's working, or what do we need to make it work better than it is working. So the way we've organized them is the first one in terms of the sort of different categories of these implementation pathways. The first is social resilience. So that's public health, community adaptive capacity, social cohesion, community-based solutions, basically a community or society's ability to adapt to and recover from adversity. The second one is built infrastructure. So you're going to see overlap both with what we heard from the iCarp vision and also what you all put in the poll. Build infrastructure. So this is roads, transportation systems, buildings, housing, any critical infrastructure. Third is natural and working land. So forest, watershed restoration, traditional ecological knowledge, agriculture, coastal solutions. And then finally, we have landscape level adaptation. So land use patterns, manage retreat, climate displacement and migration. And so we recognize there's overlap between these different pathways. They might not be 100% inclusive of everything that you might be thinking about, but we hope this is a good starting place for us to work with today. And one thing we just want to acknowledge is that there are, when we think about challenges or even solutions, they're kind of overarching topics like funding or governance or collaboration that probably cut across them. And that's something that we can kind of think about as we dive into each of these buckets. And again, we want to get a better understanding from your perspective and from your experience in your work that you do, or even sort of what you're learning, within these pathways, and we're going to start with challenges and then we're going to get to solutions. But what are you seeing, or where do you think we need to kind of go to kind of move the needle? So what we're going to do is we're going to break out into these four groups, and they'll each be facilitated by myself, Ignacio, Melody, and Julia. And the first one is, again, going to focus on challenges, and there'll be a little bit more instructions when we get into it. We'll do introductions. What I did want to do before we do that is turn your all attention to Jamboard, which is what we're going to be working in to do the brainstorm. So let me pull that up. So I imagine folks are, might be familiar with this. It's very similar to Miro or Mural or those sorts of things. What we're going to do is we're going to start again with challenges, and we're going to be using yellow sticky notes. You can just create one by copying and pasting and then just sort of typing it in. Here, and then we'll just all be working in this, we'll all be working in a space, in this sort of space together. So you'll notice that in case you get lost, there's one for each of the breakout groups, but we're all going to be in this Jamboard working together. And your facilitator, so when we go into the breakouts, you'll be automatically sent to a room, and your facilitator will send you the link to the Jamboard that you'll be working on. And we'll have a little bit of time for introductions, a little bit more context setting before we actually get into the brainstorming. Before we do that, I do want to make sure if folks have any questions that we can get to those now before we send you out to your breakouts to do some brainstorming and some interactive discussion here. Let's see. Okay, not seeing any. So I think we can send people to the rooms. We'll be back in a little bit. But again, we'll keep an eye on timing and make sure we're all on track here.
Excuse me, if we're not sent to the room that we want, we can select a different room by in the Menti program there.
So I'll be opening up all the rooms in just a moment. And we do have it enabled so that folks can move to a room that they're most interested in. We did do some pre-work based on what folks submitted through their pre-workshop survey, but you can still move around. We have probably 10 or 15 of you, or we don't have your responses. So it'll be up to you to determine which room you want to go in. So as Ben noted, room 1 is going to be social resilience. Room 2 will be on built infrastructure, room 3 on natural and working lands, and then room 4 on landscape level adaptation. And you'll see we've renamed each of the rooms accordingly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll also have John and Kelsey are joining me from LGC. They'll be in the main room in case anyone has any questions and needs help with the breakout room configuration. All right. I'll go ahead and launch the room. So enjoy the
Thanks,
discussion.
Julia. Okay, we'll see you on a little bit.
Hey folks, everyone here in the main room. I just wanted to make sure, is anyone not able to join the open breakout rooms?
Hi, this is Dick Fahey. I didn't get assigned to a breakout room as far as I can tell.
Oh, okay, do you not see the option to join any of them?
No, I don't.
Okay, I believe I can put you in one. Have you had a chance to look over? Do you have a preference, social resilience, built infrastructure, natural and working lands, or landscape level adaptation?
Yeah, it was the built infrastructure.
Built infrastructure.
Fire.
Oh, shit.
And we're recording. So if you have the Jamboard link still up, you're welcome to scroll through the other workshop kind of focus areas and spy on the challenges that they've identified in those groups. At this time, we ask that you please don't modify anything because the facilitators are going to work on trying to group some common themes coming out of each of the breakout rooms, but we are going to take a 10-minute break. So stretch break, you can look over the Jamboard if you're curious, and we'll reconvene at 11:15 to talk about implementation solutions and go into our next breakout room. So if you have any questions, just feel free to message in the chat and we'll be happy to answer, and we'll come back at 11:15. You can turn your camera off if you want. Stretch.
Ignacio, do you need help?
You mean by rearranging? That
Yeah.
would be helpful. You know.
Okay, I'll help.
we had a very productive session, as you can see.
Great. All right, thanks, y'all. We'll see everyone back at around 11:15. We'll have a couple folks from LGC. John and Kelsey will stay in the main room if you have any questions. But just a heads up, facilitator is going to be will be moving to a different breakout room to kind of clean up the board. So we'll see everyone back at 11:15.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone. I think we're all kind of trickling back here, but what I'm going to do is just tee it up before we send everyone back to our breakout room. So took a look at the different boards, and a lot of really great content here. I think a lot to work with and respond to. And now that we have, a good number of challenges and barriers identified, we want to pivot here and talk about potential solutions. This could be what you hope to see, what you've seen in other places work before, what you yourself have done. All these sort of ideas in terms of how do we overcome these challenges. So what are strategies, examples, etc., that we really want to be focusing on here as a way to move towards this vision of meaningful adaptation. So we're going to send you back out to the same groups that we had before. We'll be doing again the sticky note exercise, but this time around you're going to be using blue sticky notes to identify your solution. So I think that's all we've got for now. I don't know, Julia, if I missed anything.
No,
Yeah.
that about covers it. We're going to reconvene at 11:40 and do a round of super brief report outs on some key takeaways. I know there's a lot that we're each discussing in our group, so the report out doesn't need to be fully comprehensive, but any key takeaways or themes that came up. So we'll be asking folks to volunteer to be that person to help report out. Any questions or anything else before we relaunch the breakout rooms?
Yeah, Julia can do another duplicate of the built infrastructure for the blue stickies, because I don't know how we're going to manage this with the stickies that are there now, so we can have room for our solutions.
Do you want me did you want me to duplicate page 2?
Yes, duplicate it, and but with the clear frame. So yeah, just clear the frame of all the stickies for the duplicate.
Sure. So you should see that now. Let me just clear all these out. Let me go ahead and open up. Let me just make sure. Yep, first one, second one, third one. All right, let me open up all the rooms. We'll see y'all in just a second.
Okay. Let's see. All righty. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for weighing in on solutions in response to challenges. What I'm going to do is pull up the Jamboard. We're going to go through each of these for some quick report outs. Let me pull it up. And then I actually have the honor of doing the report out for the first group. So I'll just go through some of the main topics that we talked about in terms of challenges and some of the solutions that came up around social resilience. So this is sort of how communities can respond and thrive in the face of adversity. We had a lot of conversation around funding and adequate resources going to the community level, and both in terms of the amount of funding and how that funding gets to communities and what communities have to do to get it. So recognizing there's just some transactional costs with how funding makes its way to the community level, and really a call for having sort of reducing the transactional cost to get those resources. And we're also hearing that there's also, just because of current systems or rules that are in place, even the funders themselves would like to have more flexibility so they can get that money out. So some ideas came around of, and another thing I think that came up is that sometimes the funding is often in response to something happening that's already happened. And then just as you're trying to respond to one thing, there's another disaster on you. So it's sort of this compounding effect. And that really a call for, a model that's being developed around resilience hubs of having just annual appropriations and knowing the money is coming, and the community on the community level, momentum can be built. And also calls for hiring folks in the communities to help lead the work and make those connections that are so important around community resilience. We talked a bit about politics and just the fact that climate change is still a hot button issue for folks, some folk, and potentially reframing that to something that everyone can hopefully relate to, more around empowerment to protect themselves from these, these impacts that are all happening. Acknowledgement that some relationships need some work in terms of folks being empowered and being able to work collaboratively together. And then we had a fair amount of conversation around just community capacity. So recognizing that folks are busy, they're also fatigued. This is just a lot to ask. And this is certainly related to funding and folks getting paid for their knowledge and their contributions to making their communities resilient. We spent a decent amount of time talking about just the reality that economy and profit are often at odds with communities thriving, and the need to have different kinds of conversation around how do we know if community is thriving and what kind of decisions need to be made differently to really move towards this community resilience is really what we're going for here. I think those are kind of the main ones. I'll leave it up for a little bit for folks to take a look. I'd invite anyone from the room who is in there to add to it. Okay. And thank you all for to my breakout. I thought it was a great conversation. I'm going to move to room number 2, which I believe was Ignacio's group, and who's going to be giving the report out for that.
So Mark volunteered. Let's see. Okay, so Mark, we are in 2 pages here. So Mark, I can, we can scroll from the issues and then to the solutions.
Sure.
Okay, the issues were resistance, that includes the political will to do this, NIMBYism, funding and lack of funding. People talked about scaled finance, Proposition 13 reform, and need driving force steering committee and emergency resources and authorization for rapid action. There's also transportation funding. Streams must be used for transportation improvement projects. Again, more issues on funding. Highway management plan, Bay Area adaptation costs were 508, I think, billion by 2050. Also increased public-private partnerships, focusing on local input to state feasibility, personnel for tracking, inspection, training, lack of coastal resource engineers, pollution, They mentioned vegetation, habitat, and ecosystem function, pollution concentration increasing as water supply drops, stormwater management, use of runoff was also a pollution issue. Related to that, need water bodies to capture water to equalize wastewater treatment, microplastics in the water and air, flooding and sewer overspills due to bigger design storms, longer, more intense fire season, pollution concentration. EV charging was a suggestion. Make it possible to have charging EVs a subscription. Need more rapid EV charging. Data solutions, GIS scale. Provide public GIS maps of all climate change impacts that are high resolution that has not been done by any agency, including Caltrans to date. Projections accuracy, IPPC. Another one on water, dwindling water supply, but construction growth continues. Engineers build based on, I can't read that, existing GIS displays. No, that's it. That's basically
Yeah,
it.
actually, and we had some more. Jill, can you scroll one more to 4 of 8? Yeah, thank you, Mark. And there are a bunch of other ideas here for solutions anyway. As you can see, the taxes are more on the left, fees, carbon fees, VMT fees. So it's really more, the more you use carbon, the more you pay. There's some green solutions here, more urban agriculture. There's some on distributed renewable energy. So really reducing the cost of delivering services is kind of the theme there. And a lot of land use, encouraging people to walk more, which means more density and more mixed uses, less parking, and really taxing people who have big houses, I guess. So, so that's the gist of our built infrastructure. I know we had a lot of Caltrans and some water folks in our session, so God only knows what would have been if we had other sectors represented. But I guess that it would be probably parallel in application. So thanks, Mark, and that's our group 2.
Okay, thank you, Ignacio and Mark. Let's go to group 3.
Right, I have the honor of reporting out for our small but mighty group. I'll try to be brief so there's enough time for the 4th group, because I know y'all covered quite a bit too. So for us, there are 3 kind of general buckets. The left side is really focused on funding, research, evaluation challenges. That middle section around planning, coordination, capacity, and that 3rd piece kind of getting a little more specific into more targeted challenges that folks are facing around implementing natural and working land solutions. So we spent a lot of time talking about this kind of mismatch and misalignment in funding and what's needed on the ground in terms of research and evaluation. The need to have kind of longer term studies, for research and to evaluate progress towards that. But then the current funding paradigm and funders are really looking for shorter term successes, really specific metrics or measures of success. And, those are things that take time and sometimes can be rather difficult to actually capture. That mismatch, you can also see that in this drive for long range planning, but the funding structures are not structured that way. So spent a lot of time speaking to that, had some ideas for how we could start to kind of further integrate evaluation as part of the process, some ideas for specific funding programs. A lot of challenges in terms of capacity and the lack of local examples, concerns with being the first to adopt or the first to test a new idea or a new approach. Another overarching challenge identified has been this need for a longer term societal commitment, and definitely relevant to what was mentioned earlier. Just so many issues that we're experiencing, disaster after disaster. So how do we keep folks on track? How do we do that with election cycles? And land ownership also came up in terms of the need to engage with private landowners as well, bringing them into the fold as we're working on planning, coordinating across our very siloed sectors, and making sure that we're not forgetting about the mitigation side of the coin. That should be on the same coin, same side of the coin. Overall, I think solution wise, we need to coordinate more, bring more voices in, find ways to do that in a structured manner. I don't know if there's anybody else from our Natural and Working Lands group that wants to jump in. Otherwise, we can move on to our final category.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Group 4.
All right, thanks, Ben. Obviously, landscape level adaptation is a lot to think about. And I would say I'm so impressed with some of the kind of cross-cutting themes that I've seen emerge out of here, especially in relation to kind of this landscape level adaptation thought. And so starting off, we did talk about manage retreat, housing, wildfire resilience, and insurance a lot, which I'll cover in the next page. But for these kind of themes that emerged, we have a lot of different thoughts here on how to use landscape ecology better for climate resilience projects, how to adapt to natural landscape boundaries that don't always follow jurisdictional boundaries. I won't read all of them, but you can kind of get a sense here. There's a lot of ecology and land use practices and thoughts of challenges relating to that. And so a lot of this, some of the solutions, we didn't focus on this too much for solutions, but there's like a lot of science to application, adaptation, and research needs here, and how to develop those pathways. We also talked about some resilience tracking and having a shared definition of resilience. So what does landscape level resilience mean? And how do we use some of these pilot projects that have been implemented, and what's a path forward to scale those up? And so one of our solutions here was to develop shared resilience tracking methods, which there's a lot of work being done on this right now through the state adaptation strategy and ICARP. And so please participate in the state process. We have a note there. And we also talked about regional coordination, political will, and trust. And again, discuss these in some of the Seal Rise and retreat conversations, and how do we build trust between government agencies and community leaders. And also a potential solution is coordinating vulnerability and adaptation plans among multiple agencies, realizing that these plans are sometimes developed in context of certain things, like context of beach infrastructure versus context of other assets to protect. And so next page, Ben or Julia. All right, and so we talked a lot about managed retreat housing, wildfire resilience, and we spent quite a lot of time talking about managed retreat and how everyone is scared of this this word and what does that mean. And so some potential brainstorming creative solutions were things like wait long enough when houses aren't worth much to buy them. Kind of a practical thought, because realizing that coastal property in California is really expensive. We also talked about potential easements or purchasing properties and renting it back, like SB 83, trading land, moving houses out of beach areas to other open space, opportunity to design resilient communities, but obviously has some setbacks in terms of this is already open space. Are you trading one climate stressor or risk for another climate stressor or risk? And so how do you work with multiple stressors? And one of a really simple and practical solution is like, we just need to talk about it. How can we depoliticize the conversation to be able to talk about these solutions? Can we develop local programs and committees to negotiate different options and come to folks with solutions rather than just like, this is going to be a problem for your house. And so we also talked about insurance a lot. How can we work with insurance companies to incorporate landscape scale adaptation strategies in their risk analyses? and how can we create incentives to build landscape scale strategies. So this kind of ties back to both housing, wildfire resilience, and managed retreat. We had a lot of talk about how to create fire resilient housing and designs of communities to reduce vulnerability. And this also ties back to just managing potential adaptation strategies in these highly vulnerable areas. So that was a lot. Sorry, everyone's really way overwhelmed, but this is such a productive conversation. So I'll turn it back to you, Ben.
That was great. Thank you. Yeah, I think there's, thinking about subsequent workshops, and I'm going to turn it over to Ignacio. I think there's a lot of great topics here that we can dive into in more detail. So I think we want to talk about how we can make sure we get more input from you all. If there's anything in particular you want to dive into and have more discussion around. So Ignacio, I'll turn it over to you for closing remarks.
Right. Thank you everyone again for joining us. My head is aching from all this creative ideas. I think you've given LGC and your facilitators a lot to think about. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to try to organize, see where these are going. Perhaps look at where there are missing, pieces there, because we don't really represent the entire, different sectors of the population. But this is a great starting point. If you have any additional ideas, please feel free to reach out to LGC if there's something that comes up. Let's see, the next steps is that we will also draft an updated vision statement to guide our future work together. So again, this is a very fluid conversation we're having here. And again, review the group norms. You've had this a sample of how we interact. If you can think of other ways you can make this more productive, I can't imagine, because we were very productive today. But if you have any other ideas, please suggest them, send them to Julia. The Jamboard is still there. So Julia will let us know if the Jamboard will exist or when we will stop getting input. I think, as we've heard this, people might come up with more ideas. So find a way to get more input. And there will also review responses to the pre-workshop, the workshop pre-survey regarding what folks are hoping to get out of this, and revisit what our work product to date. So now, Julia, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Ignacio. I just in the chat sent a link to the Jamboard, same Jamboard, but created a new slide. Feel free to add sticky notes for anything that you'd like to focus on future workshops. Just want to make sure that these workshops are designed in a way that, that provide value. We also asked a question in the pre-survey around that, so we'll definitely review those responses. As Ben and Ignacio and Melody all already noted, we covered a lot today. So kudos to everybody for following some of the group norms and jumping in and being courageous and sharing your input. And yeah, it was a lot. This is our first workshops. We really kind of wanted to get as much of our collective brains and thoughts out there so we can then think about how we move forward as part of this track. So stay tuned. We will share a recording of this workshop. It's only the main session, but we will share that. We'll also share a PDF version of the Jamboard. That's where you'll see most of the discussion getting captured. We'll also share a link out to the Google Doc of the group norms in case folks want to suggest any improvements for future workshops. And we'll see everyone again, hopefully for the second workshop of this track, which is August 19th, 9 to 11 a.m. I'll also flag that we are aware that there are some issues with the Google group that we set up. Not everyone might be getting everything. So please stay tuned. We're trying to resolve all of that, but hopefully, all of you saw the invitation and got all of the materials in advance. So with that, I think we'll let everyone go. Thanks again so much for taking time to join us for this workshop, and huge thanks to all of our facilitators for guiding this conversation. We'll see you in a few weeks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.